I'm thrilled. This is Faith Adiele, and she is fantastic. She's our columnist at Detour. She is the inaugural columnist, you know? I know, I've been a fan of your work for such a long time, and I just want to talk to you a little bit about, well, you just left a group of Black women writers.
It's interesting because like normally Black History Month, we're all worn out. People are asking us to do stuff for free. So it was kind of amazing that this Black owned inn reached out and they're like, we want to bring 10 Black women here to the inn to be pampered and fed by a Black chef and be able to hang out in these rooms filled with Black art and Black books and just do your work and like just take care of you. And so it was,
That
it was
sounds
a great
pretty
way
amazing.
to,
Well, like, where were you?
Chestertown, Maryland. And one of the really wonderful things is the last day, a local leader who's gotten money from the Smithsonian to do local Black history came and took us to the one-room schoolhouse that had been for since the 1800s, had been teaching Black students all the way up until 1950. And she's created all these oral histories and collected stuff from people, gone to these churches. And then, everyone's very aware of, their legacy, their ties to Harriet Tubman. And I know other people who are doing work around there. So it felt really special.
What kind of genres were like the sisters that got together, these writers? Were y'all all, did you have novelists and poets and screenwriters, like, in different generations? And talk to me.
It was all prose this time. This was the inaugural group. And the idea was to just have like 10 prose writers. And then if it works, I think they might move into poets. Poets are a little nutty. I'm not sure if you want them in your house for 10 days. They figured that prose writers have some skills.
This is right.
We can play nicely. It was fairly intergenerational. I mean, everybody had to be well established. So all of us had like 2 books. And then there were some, some older ones. So I think we'd range from like 40 to 60, maybe 30s to 60s, but successful, definitely different styles. A lot of novelists, a few of us who do nonfiction or people who have done both. There was also pretty well-known playwright, scriptwriter, also does children's books.
Can you talk just about how you even entered the space? I mean, obviously you've got a memoir around it. You've got 3 books to your name that I can think of. You've got an HBO thing. You've got a lot of stuff, or PBS rather. So talk
HBO
a little bit about
PBS.
that. I know you're super modest, but just kind of weave some of that into your own story here.
My own story. I mean, I came up in a family that really valued reading and storytelling, and that was something I always did. And then I've always just really been interested in kind of bridging the gap between, literary art and commercial stuff, people that, reach ordinary folks, which is why I think I move in so many different spaces. So I'm just writing my own thing, but then like maybe someone will reach out, like, Essence, and say, can you narrow it down and just do a small column about, I started writing a lot about finding my family, finding my father in Nigeria and my family members. And that was key. I wrote about flunking out of college and going to Thailand and becoming a Buddhist nun.
I know, that was amazing. I know. Right.
I mean, they're just things that happen. I don't like plan. And then I'm like, what's the story and how might it help other people to kind of share this story? So that's what I do.
The Buddhist Nun Moment was, I was, part of it said that you wanted, I think I read a little bit about that experience, and part of it was that you wanted a deeper and more immersive, understanding of the culture.
Right.
Was it that practical, or was it also super spiritual as well?
It ended up accidentally being spiritual. Like I wasn't interested in the spiritual aspect at all. I was just like, why are women choosing to do this? And I think on some level, I knew it could perhaps help me because I was in pain and I didn't have a language for it. And I thought, well, if I do something academic, maybe I can kind of recover my sense of self. And I was really fascinated by why women chose this really, really, really hard life. And then all of a sudden, in order to do it well, I had to ordain. I couldn't just be an outsider. So I was living in the temple, living their life, going through the motions so I could write well about them. And then I ended up having a spiritual experience and being like, oh my God, this is part of it. And you can't tell someone's story unless you've walked in their shoes and unless you have something at risk too, I think. And so that's what I helped, that's what helped me figure out.
But you also have this kind of like story in which you move in and out of these communities. Talk to me about that, your relationship to Black travel, and even how it connects to a monastery,
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, I come from an immigrant family that's mixed race, mixed nationality, and I was raised by my Nordic side in rural Washington, and I just wasn't, no one looked like me. And so I was always kind of craving to find people like me. And my family was kind of missing where they had come from. I knew my father had been a student from Nigeria and he had gone back. I knew my rest of my family had immigrated from Finland and Sweden and they missed home. And so the whole idea was we were part of the world and we were supposed to, when the time came, I could go out and start being a cosmopolitan citizen. So I was raised to read really widely. And as soon as I could, at age 15, I started doing study abroad programs and oftentimes being places where I was the only Black person. And I would just write about that experience. And now it's considered, really pioneering. But I was just trying to find people who looked like me, who I could connect to. And I felt like I fit in everywhere a little bit because of that kind of, being a shapeshifter and being multiracial and multicultural. Like wherever I went, I felt like I connected in some way. And so I was just kind of trying to find connections wherever I went. And so part of it was I knew nothing about Thailand, but I had the opportunity to go there as an exchange student. Was really, I was the only Black person many folks had seen. And I ended up having an amazing experience, one, because they hadn't seen Black folks, so they didn't have any preconceived notions. And that became part of my story that, you can find connection and home and similarities wherever you go.
Wow. I remember there's a moment in which your mom says, okay, connect, like you were invited to go to Nigeria, I guess, to study. And she encouraged it. And that was another path, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I actually had a fellowship to go to Sri Lanka, I think, and then the war broke out there. So I was just kind of waiting, trying to figure out where to go. The last minute, my scholarship got moved to Nigeria, and they didn't even know that I was of Nigerian heritage. And I was like, is this a sign? And my mom was like, yes, this is a sign. You need to go. I've been thinking that's the next step for you. And she gave me the love letters that she and my father had exchanged. And so I read these letters and just kind of fell in love with this young man and his excitement about Nigerian independence and the possibility of Nigeria being a leader in the world. And I was like, I'm going to go. I'm just going to see, like, clearly I've been called to see what that's about.
Wow.
And I'm also an only child for my mom. So I was hoping that I would find siblings in Nigeria and figure out what it was like, what that Nigerian identity was going to be.
There's something kind of Obama-esque about this story, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I call myself the original Obama. It's like, if you like Obama, you'll love Faith.
Exactly. How do you feel about the state of the art right now? Seeing there's so many people now like that populate this space. They're on Instagram. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about how optimistic you are about the form itself, and how so many new entrants may even influence the kind of stories you might want to be telling these days. Does it raise the bar, lower the bar, or like what?
Well, I started the nation's first writing workshop for travelers of color. I'd say it was almost maybe 9 years ago. And I remember at the time, like a lot of folks didn't know what I was talking about. They're like, are you talking about guidebooks? And I was like, no, there's an entire, tradition of literary travel that we have been shut out of. And yet nobody travels more than folks of color. We travel for different reasons, possibly, and maybe the leisure travel we've come to that more lately, but we have been traveling, circumnavigating the world for years. And we are also the most visited people. Like our countries are the sites of tourism and we travel in these huge numbers, and yet we're not in the narrative. And so I was always trying to educate people about, the complex narratives we're writing are in fact travel literature. We're just not seeing it that way, and we're traveling as well. And so then also reaching out to magazines and saying, there's this really untapped market of people who are, doing all this travel in a really interesting kind of nuanced way. So I've been involved in kind of trying to widen the definition of travel writing for years, and then also interrupt a lot of the kind of colonial tropes that are embedded in travel writing. And then all of a sudden, this huge kind of new Black travel movement happened, and young millennials traveling, and it just became this thing. And they were going to places that I'd been the only person there. So it's exciting, and like anything, it's a bit unregulated, a little bit crazy. And I think we want to be careful that we don't just use our blue passport privilege to travel in the way that white folks have been traveling. We want to travel in a more careful, responsible, nuanced way that helps us create a global society and kind of interrupts those old stories.
Wow, that's fantastic. That really is. I mean, when I saw the way you articulate Black travel really is kind of the blueprint from which Detour, was born. So thank you. I had no idea, but I stand on really tall shoulders, and I'm just thrilled to have you. With us today. And I hope to continue reading you, and it's Faith Adiele. And so thank you very much.